Hello, Victoria, and thank you so much for agreeing to do this virtual author visit with the Westbury Memorial Public Library. Harlem Rhapsody was a fabulous book. Thank you for introducing us and all readers to Jessie Redmond Fawcett, an amazing woman who had a large impact on the literary movement during the Harlem Renaissance. We will do this interview spoiler free as to give the audience
Okay.
members who are in the midst of reading the book or haven't started reading the book an introduction to the book. And can you please share a little what this book is about?
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for your patience, and thank you for letting me know it's spoiler free. But this book is actually about what you said. It is about the woman who ignited the Harlem Renaissance. And while it's so weird, while we know all of the legends, we don't know the woman who was behind the legends. I always say that Jessie Redmond Fawcett is a woman of firsts. She was the first young Black woman to graduate from the Philadelphia High School for girls. She was the first woman to graduate from Cornell University, first Black woman. She was the first Black woman to be Phi Beta Kappa. Then she went on to become the first literary editor of the Crisis magazine. And then she was the first to discover almost every single literary legend that we know from the Harlem Renaissance. And not only did she discover them, she published them first. And then also, the thing that really gets to me is she wrote the first novel about the Black middle class. And that gets to me because I stand on her shoulders that way.
That's amazing. I didn't even know some of those first as well, so thank you for sharing that as well. And I was wondering, can you share a little more detail about this book in regard to the themes of the book?
I think there are several themes. I think what would one of the there's the themes of being a woman working at a time when she had no agency at all, because women, we always think about the 20s at a time when women didn't have the right to vote. But it was worse than that. A woman couldn't get her own name on a lease in an apartment. A woman couldn't have a financial bank account. Like, that's crazy to me. So that was one theme of her pursuing through that. And that's the sexism. Of course, she had the racism. So I'm not sure, which one would you want to talk about? Where do you want me to start with that?
Whichever you like. I find all those fascinating. If you want to start, the issues. I mean, I think there's two parts of it. First of all, like what isn't the issues she's doing as a woman, and also the issues as an African American woman as well, right? So,
Yeah, and it's true. But you know what I found as I was researching it? That even though she had racism, the biggest problem for her was
Yes,
sexism.
that's
Was
correct.
the sexism, because she had the sexism from
Mhm.
white America and Black America.
America.
And
Absolutely.
so that, to me, and I find that to be fascinating, at a time when with the rise of Jim Crow and everything that was going on,
Mhm.
that what she faced was the sexism, and that there were no women role models. She
Right.
was it. She was the one who had to step forward. But you know who I think, as she was going through all these things of being a woman, you know who I think her greatest role model was
Mhm.
her mother.
Right.
Her mother, in lots of ways. Like, if I had time, I'd write a book about her mother, because I was fascinated with Isabella Huff Fawcett from the moment I discovered her. And I had already started writing the book a little bit. And when I discovered she was a white Jewish woman, that really threw
Mhm.
me for a loop, because I
Right.
was like, okay, this doesn't make sense for a couple of reasons. This is
Mhm.
at the end of the 1800s. And so Isabella Huff is a white Jewish woman who's a widow with three children, and
Mhm.
she meets a Black preacher, so not even of the same faith, with seven children, and he's a widower. And I
Mhm.
was like, well, why would this woman want to marry a Black man? I mean,
Yep.
seriously, you're already in trouble. You're already going to have a really hard time being a widow. And I'm sure it wasn't easy being Jewish at that time.
Mhm.
Why would you make it worse for yourself? And I couldn't even move forward until I had the answer to that. And I talked to my agent and we couldn't figure it out. And something told me to go to the census. What I was looking for in the census was her parents. Because I said, we are all the product of our parents. So I wanted to know who was her mother and father. Well, what I discovered on the census was that her first husband was Black.
Oh,
And
really?
that's, yes.
Wow.
And that doesn't take away too much from the book.
Right.
It's not a spoiler. Her first husband was Black. And then I discovered she was an integrationist. I had never heard that term before.
Right.
But what they were abolitionists during slavery. And then when slavery ended, they became integrationists who believed that the only way you were going to be able to have equality in this country was in the full integration of the races. So Isabella Huff was going to integrate America all by herself because she had three mixed children with her first husband. He passed away. Then she had three mixed children with
Her second.
Jesse's father, and
Mhm.
then he passed away. And she would have married again because she wasn't talking integration. She was living integration. That was the woman who raised Jesse. And I say that she was her greatest role model because I can imagine what it was like for Isabella to have she only had biracial children, three with her first husband, three with her second husband. I can imagine what it was like for her to go advocate for her children.
Yeah.
I bet you with everything in me, I don't have proof of this, but I'll bet you with everything in me that she got Jessie into the Philadelphia High School for Girls.
Yeah.
So she used her white privilege when she could for her children. And then she explained to all of her mixed children that you're not white. This world is not going to be easy for you.
Mhm.
And I loved her for that. So I think that while Jessie was a woman who was the first of a lot of things, and she was a woman to me who was like 100 years ahead of her time. I say
Right.
she was born in the 20th century, but she had 21st century oomph. She just thought that this is where she was supposed to be. It was her mother, I think, who gave her all of her
Mhm.
medal. I think it was her mother who gave it to her. I
Mhm.
love that woman. I love that woman.
Fascinating. And she was also way ahead of her time too, to even, who would even have thought of that during that
Who
time?
would think of that? Like there were a
Right.
lot of people that talked it.
That's
And
it.
there was a lot of people that talked what they thought they believed. Like I think about Frederick Douglass. His second wife was white, and he had met his second wife after his wife died. He met her through her parents because they were great abolitionists, and they supported everything he did until he married their daughter,
Right.
and
Right.
then they disowned her and him.
Mhm.
And so Isabella Huff wasn't just talking this, she was walking this when
Right.
there were a lot of people that talked it better than they walked it.
Mhm. Okay.
Okay.
Mhm.
So I'm so curious, and I think some people might know already because they read the author's notes, but I was wondering if share a little bit about the inspiration for this book.
Yes, so that was interesting too because it was my first solo project. And
Oh.
so so my first solo project in historical fiction. I was writing a long time ago, so I have 25 books by myself, but it was my first solo historical fiction project. And so I knew that I had to find someone that I would want to spend the next 2 years with. somebody who gets me in trouble with Zoom meetings where I'm supposed to be because I'm so into their story.
Oh, wow.
And so I knew that what I want to do. I always want to be that engrossed with the person, become part of their lives. And so I wish I had a nice, intelligent way that I had discovered this. You're going to just see I kind of bumped into it because what I did is I started with the decades. I started with decades that interest me. And the 20s and the 60s interest me. And I think it's for the same reason. As a writer, I want to write about the fashion. I want to write about, the music. I mean, the 20s and the 60s are both very vivid, it makes it easier to write about as a writer. And
Right.
then also, I was interested in it because both of those periods were also a rise of Black pride.
Mm-hmm.
For different reasons, but the rise of Black pride. So I was looking in the 20s and the 60s, and I started looking in the same cities like New York, Washington, D.C., some of the larger ones. So in the 20s, in New York City, I bumped into Harlem Renaissance. Like I
Okay.
bumped into it. I wish
Yeah.
I were, I want to be able to say, oh, I went looking for that. But I bumped right into it.
Yeah.
But what I didn't bump into was Jesse Redmond Fawcett because I said, okay, that's perfect for me. It would make so much sense. No one else has done a historical fiction on
Right.
On the Harlem Renaissance. Of course I should do this. And so I Googled, and Google is not the way you research. But just for the beginning, I Googled women of the Harlem Renaissance.
Mm.
And the names that came up were Langston Hughes, County Cullen. And I was like, even Google's a misogynist. I clearly said women. And so, but underneath Langston Hughes, there was a quote that said Jessie Redmond Fawcett
Mm-hmm.
was the literary midwife of the Harlem Renaissance. And I had never heard of her.
Yeah.
So it didn't really stop me, but I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then the next thing was a podcast called Harlem on My Mind by a journalist by the name of Tremaine Lee. And it was a 25-minute podcast that I listened to. I was sold. I was like, when I heard about this woman and what she went to the Crisis magazine, I knew about the Crisis. I knew
Right.
about the NAACP. I knew about Langston Hughes, County Cullen, Nella Larson, Gwendolyn Brooks, Jean Toomer, every single
Right.
one of them.
Right.
And so, but I knew them. I met them all as legends.
Right.
She met them all as children.
Yeah.
I mean, they were genuine. Langston Hughes was so afraid to go to the luncheon. This is that part in the book. Almost all the book is true. That part in the book is true. He was so afraid to go to the luncheon that he took his mother. At
Yeah.
17, I may have done the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's how I found it. I don't want to say by accident because I was meant to write this book. But I didn't set out on a path um in my mind saying I'm going to look for the Harlem Renaissance. I wish I did. But
Mm.
we discover all of our stories that way. I
Right.
don't think they're by mistake, but there's no way for us to go and say we're looking for Jesse when we don't know about Jesse.
Exactly. Right.
There's no way for us to say we're going to look for something in, because we don't know who's missing.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of bump into them and we hear about these little stories and things.
Mm-hmm.
And my co-author keeps like a running list of people that she's run into over the years. So
Mm-hmm.
that's what I'm starting to do.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Building on that, can you explain a little more about the research you did for this novel? I always find it interesting. I'm sure others here too, to discover the research process that the authors do for historical fiction novels. But as I said before, even more after reading the author notes, and I was wondering if you could share a little more about this, especially how it relates to the author.
Yes, so I'm from New York, which is one of the reasons why I was looking for a story in New York. So I'm not very creative. I just kind of go to places that I kind of know already. But I've never lived in Harlem.
Mm-hmm.
Never lived in Harlem, even though both of my parents were born in Harlem, but neither one of them stayed there for very long. And so I one of the first things I wanted to do was go move to New York. And I moved, but I lived in a hotel. I was, I moved for 5 weeks, 3 weeks the first time, 2 weeks the second time. And I did that to be able to walk the streets of Harlem because there were so many important buildings that were still
Right.
standing. The
Right.
church where she met County Cullen, still
Mhm.
there. The
Right.
apartment where she lives, still there. The YMCA where Langston Hughes lives, still there. And
Mhm.
most importantly, the 135th Street Library is
Right.
still there. It's
Yes.
now called the Schomburg
Yes.
Research Center,
Yes.
and it's one of the largest collections of African American history, artifacts, everything that you wanted to know.
Right.
Like the Schomburg is a big deal. And so
Mhm.
I went to the Schomburg. I had to walk 10 blocks, so that was good too. New York, walking around.
Mhm.
Every day. I went there like it was my job. Well, I guess it was my job, but I went
Mhm.
there every day from opening to closing, and I did a whole bunch of things. I read the two biographies of W.E.B. Du Bois.
Mhm.
They were both of them won Pulitzer prizes. So I depended on that biographer's history of him. I read every single issue of the Crisis magazine from
Wow.
October 1919 until the
Mhm.
middle of 1925. Now, the first reason I read those, I was only reading that to get the language. I
Right.
was very concerned that I didn't want anyone to read this book and feel like they were in 2025. I wanted
Mhm.
everyone to feel like they were in 1925. And so I read and when I say everything, I read every article, every poem, and every ad. And it actually ended up giving me a lot more because it gave me a lot of the information. Like I knew what they were doing. That's how I found out about all of WEB's travels. That's how I found out about the Pan African Congress, how they flew in an aeroplane. That's where I found out all of that information. And then I also read personal letters. And so I find it fascinating at that time, people wrote a lot of letters, we know that. And then people like W.E.B. Du Bois and Frederick Douglass, and they kept their papers and donated their, they knew they were leaving a legacy. They knew that. And so WEB's letters I found some in books and on Amazon, some at the Schomburg. There's some at this university. I didn't need to go down there because I had so much I had, and some at the University of Massachusetts at Amherst, which I did go to look at. Then I read a lot of Langston Hughes letters. I read a lot of Jessie's letters, though she didn't have as much as everybody else. And all of that helped me to piece together the story.
Very
I
good.
love that research. I mean, that's the thing I love best about historical fiction versus the kind of fiction I had before. I love learning. And so I learned all of this stuff. And that's what I love best about writing these novels.
And I was gonna say like I feel the same whenever I read these type of books, like learning all about Jesse Redmond Fawcett and the other talents of the Harlem Renaissance. And after reading the book, I was like, oh, I gotta make a note to look up this person after I read the book and do more research. Um, so what I was going to say was, what knowledge did you have about these authors and the artists of the other disciplines of the Harlem Renaissance before you read the book?
I had nothing on Jessie. Never heard her name. But I mean, I had everything that everybody else had with Langston Hughes. I knew the Negro speaks of rivers. I knew that, that poem that I love the most. I think it's called Mother to Son or Son to Mother. Life for me ain't no crystal stair. I love that. What did I know about Nella Larson? I knew about her book Passing. I didn't even know about her book Quicksand. And in the novel, in Harlem Rhapsody, she's writing Quicksand. I didn't know anything about it, and I didn't really know, all I knew about these people were their works. When I was writing this book and had to do the research, I learned so much more than their works. I learned a lot about their life. So I didn't know about Langston Hughes' problems at Columbia. Well, I shouldn't say that. About 2 years ago, Columbia did a public apology to Langston Hughes. I didn't spend a lot of time thinking about what it was, but they apologized for how they treated him at Columbia. So I knew a little bit about that, but I didn't know the extent of it. I should have if they were going to make a public apology, this late. I didn't know anything about County Cullen except that he was a poet. I knew nothing about Gene Toomer except that he was a poet, and I found his angst in life some of the most interesting, not wanting to be a Black writer, not wanting to be a white writer, wanting to be an American writer, and that he was so principled that he stood on that and never sold more than 500 copies of his book. And so I knew what we all knew. And here's the reason why that's such a good question. If you had asked me before I wrote this book, I would have said, oh, I know a lot about W.E.B. Du Bois. All I knew about W.E.B. Du Bois was his name because I learned so much about him in doing the research of this book.
Yeah, it's true. We learn like so many different facets about him, right? And go more into that later. I was going to say, what did you feel was most important for readers to learn about Jesse Redmond Fawcett and the others like Noah Larson, County Cohen, and Langston Hughes and others mentioned in the book?
That's a good question. No one's asked me that, but you know what? I think they all give us different lessons. I think Jesse gives us a lesson of resilience. Jesse knew, there are a lot of people that sometimes will ask me, why didn't Jesse just leave? And I'm like, leave to do what? Like there was no other job she was going to get. When she left the crisis, she left at the highest point where she knew all the founders of the NAACP, and they were white, mostly of them were white. She knew, so she had those connections. She had just helped the crisis do so well. She had written this critically acclaimed novel. She had discovered all of these people. And so she was leaving at the highest point, and yet she still could never get a job in publishing after that. Because more that she was a woman, she was a Black woman too, but it was the misogyny that was really bad at that point. And they felt like women, if you can't even have a bank account, how could they trust you to do anything? I mean, I that was their thinking, and women were like, okay, I'm fine with not having a bank account, but we're looking at it with 21st century eyes. So I think Jesse taught resilience. I think um, Langston taught a little bit about just living your truth. Like he ended up breaking up with that patron that he had, Charlotte Mason. Um, and they had a bad breakup because she became very controlling and she wanted him to write certain things. And he wouldn't. He stuck to his guns on that. He wrote what he wrote, and that was it. So I think Gene Toomer is a writer who really who got to me personally with his thing about, I don't want to be Black, I don't want to be white, I want to be American. And the reason he got to me is that so many times and I'll say me, especially when a person says, I'm not Black, I look at them and say, yeah, you're Black. Why are you saying you're Black? And what Gene Toomer taught me was it is not, I need to mind my business. Like everybody should look at their own family and then they decide. And it's not up to me to say what a person is. He had such a good point when he said that the one drop rule was made up by white supremacists. So why are we following what white supremacists say? So he really touched me a lot. And then I learned such great lessons from W.E.B. Du Bois. Because like I said before, I thought I knew his name. I knew him, but all I knew was his name. Because I think I was put on earth to write this book. I've written 30 novels, and I think this is the most important book I've ever written. And I think this is the most important book I've ever written because of this time. It wasn't until I started researching and really listening to W.E.B. Du Bois that I began to look at my writing as more than just writing. He called the word he used in the 1920s was propaganda. Art should be propaganda. The word we would use today is activism, using your art as activism. I never thought about that. Never thought that I could be an activist with writing. I wrote books that ended up on Lifetime TV. They never seemed like, I have 5 novels that are on Lifetime. And so I never looked at my writing as anything more than pure entertainment. But really studying W.E.B. Du Bois and reading The Souls of Black Folks again and all of that, I began to look at the power of my pen. And I was thinking that as a time such as this, I'm writing historical fiction when people are telling me that my history isn't important. And so I said, well, this is the way that I can use my art as activism. I can use my art as activism while they're trying to bury my history. I can excavate my history. While they try to ban a book, I could write 2 books. And it was only because of really studying W.E.B. Du Bois and I was studying him in this moment that he's changed what I will do with my pen from this point forward. It's just, I can still entertain because I will never forget that is still my job as an artist. But my art is my activism. My art is my resistance. This is the way that I will fight against what I don't agree with in this country.
That's a very powerful point, and I see that really illustrated through the book as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and it came out through the book, but those weren't my words. Do you know what I mean? I was quote. So as you're reading and you're getting the message, I was getting that message as I was writing. Like I was a reader, I was a student of WE. It was a fascinating thing for me because I've written 2 other historical novels, which I think are just as important. But this one like touched my heart. Like this one, it was like WEB was saying, Victoria Christopher Murray, I'm talking to you. I'm talking to you in 2025.
I just love that connection, how it ties together. What was your favorite thing about writing about Jesse Redmond Fawcett, and what was the most challenging part?
Oh, good. So what was my favorite thing? My favorite thing while I was writing her was that she was so much like me as a writer and how everything that happens in your life just ends up on the page, it seems. So I would just absolutely love that. I felt like as I was writing her, I knew it was an important story because her history had been erased. And if I hadn't told her story now, she could have been erased forever and never part of it. So I thought I really enjoyed that. And I liken it to Zora Neale Hurston. We didn't know her name before the 1970s. Nobody knew her name. She died in obscurity, complete obscurity. And then Alice Walker, who wrote The Color Purple, had read some of Zora's works, and she ended up going down to Florida, finding Zora's unmarked grave. She died poor, and then just bringing Zora back to life. That was not my intent when I wrote Jessie. I told you I bumped into the Harlem Renaissance. But afterwards, when the book came out and people started saying, I've never heard of her and I love her, I began to think, wow, I hope that's what happens to Jessie. I have a 6-year-old granddaughter, and I hope she says, nobody knew Jessie's name. I hope when she's 20 that she's saying, what do you mean nobody knew Jessie? I hope everybody knows. So that was the most fun part. The most challenging part was the affair. When I first found out I didn't know about the affair right in the beginning, but pretty close to the beginning. I was like, oh, just shoot me now. Because I was like, that's going to mess up everything of the accomplishments, of her accomplishments. And then I was thinking, oh, W.E.B. Du Bois, people are going to be mad about this. But then I had to reconcile it again. I have to do it before I ask readers to do it. And I had to realize, and he helped me realize this with him and everybody, that I was thinking about W.E.B. Du Bois as an extraordinary man. He wasn't an extraordinary man. He was an ordinary man who accomplished extraordinary things. And when we look at people, instead of putting them up on pedestals, when we look at them as ordinary people, and they have extraordinary accomplishments, we can accept their flaws. But when we're thinking about them as extraordinary people, we're like, they're not supposed to be flawed. And so I reconciled that, and I really wanted to write their scenes, their intimacy with care, because I didn't want it to overpower the book. It was an important part that I couldn't leave out, but I wanted to do that. And then I found out she was a member of the same sorority that I am a member of. I'm a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, and I almost said I'm going to have to give my publisher back the money. I can't write this book if I got to tell the secrets of Delta. But again, I had to reconcile it all and say, it's not up to me to judge what someone's life is. If I'm going to write an autobiographical novel, not a biographical novel, I need to tell their whole story.
Agreed, definitely. Can you share a little about your journey to becoming an author and the path it took to you to become the author you are today?
Yes, so I've always wanted to be an author. My entire life, the only thing I've ever wanted to do was to be an author. There was a moment when I wanted to be a ballerina, and I think that was only because I was taking ballet classes. And then I'm telling you the truth right here. Well, everything I'm telling you. I wanted to be the school crossing guard when I was in kindergarten because Mrs. Kennedy was the nicest lady ever. So, but the only thing I really wanted to be was a writer. And I wrote my very first masterpiece when I was 7 years old. And a lot of people say, oh, you can't write a masterpiece at 7. Well, you can if you plagiarize. Because I wrote something called Betty and the Witch. And it was about a little girl who wore a red uniform with a hood to school every day. She had 3 bears who were her brothers, and 3 pigs were her sisters, and their best friends lived next door, and they were 7 little people. And I had a good witch and a bad witch, but I can't remember what their roles were totally in it. But I was proud of it for one reason. It was 20 pages long, and it was longer than the books I was reading. And so I gave it to my parents because I was so proud of this 20-page masterpiece that I'd written. And my parents must have been proud of it too, because not known to me, they gave it to my teacher, and probably during one of those parent-teacher conferences thing. And so she read it, and she had the entire 2nd grade perform it as a play. Now, this is what I don't remember a lot, but I remember her telling me that I could have any role I wanted because I'd written it. And that felt very important to me. I was like, this writing thing could be an important thing. Then I remember some of the rehearsals, but the thing I remember the most is after we performed what I'm sure was a horrible play. After we performed the play, the teacher, we had gone off the stage, and Mrs. Asness came and got my hand and brought me back on, and I wasn't sure what was going on. And she introduced me to the entire auditorium of parents and kids in other grades as the writer. I became a writer that night. I was 7 years old. I wanted to be a writer, and I became a writer that night. She called me the writer. And it just took me many years to get there, because even though this was I think I was born with this desire. And so I don't know why. My parents were readers, big readers, so maybe it had something to do with them reading to me, when I was in the womb. But the thing that is so interesting is, even though that was my desire, you can't be what you don't see. And as I was growing up, I never saw characters who looked like me in a book, never saw characters that looked like me on television, never saw a Black writer. And it wasn't until I got to high school that a librarian, a white librarian who knew how much I was in there, and she said, "You're gonna read every book in here," and that was my plan. She ordered a book for me. I was a freshman in high school. And when I turned over the book, she said, "I want you to read this book." And I was surprised to see a Black man on the back of the book. And I said, "It's a book about him." And she said, "No, the book is by him. He's the writer." And it was Richard Wright, Native Son. And after that, she and my parents would go out and specifically look for books for me. So I read Maya Angelou. I think that was when my parents realized, okay, maybe we need to, they always had gotten me books. I mean, I had a library in my room. My sister had her own library in her room. But I think my parents saw the importance of me seeing writers who looked like me. And so that's how I got there. And it took me many years. I didn't write my first novel until I was 42 years old, but I've been writing full time ever since.
Oh, fabulous story. I love that story about the play as well. And if you teach
Be-
your parents,
Betty and the Witch, Betty and the Witch.
oh, you know,
And I got to choose any part I wanted, and I chose the witch. I wonder if I need therapy for that. Because wouldn't I have chosen Betty? Like,
uh,
I don't know why I didn't choose Betty.
so interesting. Um, let's see. Our audience and I love to hear book recommendations. Can you please share some books that you read recently that you could recommend?
Oh, yes. So I read a book called Happy Land by Dolen, Perkins, Valdez, another historical fiction book, which was fantastic for me. I love that book because I think it's going to become part of the historical record. She found information from the archives that historians didn't know. So I'm always impressed with that because I use historians' information. Then I read a great book that's not out yet, but it was to give a blurb, but it was called Best Boy by Deborah Goodridge Royce, I think is her last name. Did any of you watch All My Children back in the day?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know she was an actress on there for a number of years.
Yeah, she was Erica Kane's sister.
Sister.
Best Boy is good. That book is coming out like from the first, and she writes it so differently, like in 3 timelines. It is wonderful. So I just read that book, and I'm so glad you asked me that because now I got to remember to write the blurb. Sometimes I finish the book and forget to write the blurb. And I'm reading a book now Silver Cane. That was her name. So,
Right.
and she was interviewing me. She was interviewing me a couple of years ago and I kept looking at her saying, "Gosh, she looks so familiar." Like I didn't put her name with it. And then in the middle of the interview, she said something like, "Yeah, because when I was on All My Children, I was doing," and I was like, "Wait, what?" And so messed me up for the rest of the interview because I was such an All My Children fan. And I loved Silver because she was crazy. And that's what you're supposed to do, like the crazy people. And so I'm reading another good book now that just came out today. And it's called A Sky Full of Love. And listen to this premise. And it's not giving away too much because this is where the book begins. Imagine a woman, she was kidnapped 15 years ago. And so her family, who looked for her for years and years and years, presumed her dead. And then she's found. And she comes back. And forget about the fact that she doesn't even know what an iPad is or what's a Facebook. She doesn't know about that stuff. But her daughter, who was 2, is now 17. And her husband, who mourned her for 10 years, is remarried to her sister.
Wow.
I
Who's
know.
the author of that one?
The author's name is Lorna, Lorna Lewis, Lewis. I'm in the middle of that book. That book is so good because it's such and where the author got the idea. She was 13 when her mother passed away. And she kept thinking to herself, she said she needed as a 13-year-old to just believe her mother was alive. And then when her father remarried several years later, she kept saying, "Ooh, my mother's gonna come back now," because she said she told herself that a doctor fell in love with her mother and just kidnapped her. And so she got it kind of from a personal experience. I thought that story was almost as interesting as the book itself.
That is definitely great. Yeah, very fascinating. Um, as you were saying before, you were really engrossed in that book you were reading. I was wondering, are you able to share anything about it? Because now you got me really intrigued.
Yeah, so it's really interesting too because one of the reasons I was a little discombobulated was the only reason I saw it, I was reading an email from, because we don't have a title. We have finished the book. We are working on edits. The book is, they're trying to come up with a cover and we don't have a title. So my editor had just sent us an email saying, "Here, what are these ideas?" And we were writing back, "No, we don't like them." And I look at the clock on my phone and I'm like, "You're kidding me. How did it get to be 7:20 when it was 6:15 5 minutes ago?" So that's what happened. So we don't have a title yet, and we're still kind of battling through it. But have you ever watched The Godfather? And so you know that dude is made up of a compilation of people. Mostly he's Lucky Luciano. And so this book that we're working on is about the first Black prosecutor in New York who brought down Lucky Luciano, the first Black female prosecutor in New York. She is the one who brought down Lucky Luciano. Now, what is so funny is I never heard of her, and those are the stories we're looking for, the ones you've never heard of. And so when my co-author Marie told me about her, the first thing I did was Google. Google's not how we research, but that's how. And what I found was so funny was like it came up, Eunice Carter, and it had Mob Museum. So I'm like, this is crazy. The mob honors her. They know her, but I had never heard her name. So it's really very interesting because she worked with the most notorious madam in New York to bring down Lucky Luciano. He went to prison for 50 years. Now, he did get out on a technicality, but then they deported him. But he only went to prison because of the first Black female prosecutor. Isn't that crazy that we didn't know her name?
Oh, that's gonna be an amazing story to read as well. Wow.
Yeah, this one is a good one because of the mob and how dangerous that whole thing was. And she was fearless. She was fearless. Like there were a couple of things that were done to her that I would have said, "Okay, I'm out. I'm done. Bye. See ya. Deuces." I would have said all that. I would have told them all that.
That's so amazing. At this point, I'm going to open up to questions. So if anyone has a question, again, you can use the no reaction, raise your hand one. I see Maria has a question, so we'll start there. And
Well,
we
I
have
agreed with you about the stepmom, the mother. I
Yes.
read, I wrote down all my notes. In chapter 11, the mother says, "A mother is more than someone who births you. A mother is someone who loves you, especially at those times when you are most unlovable." I love that quote. It was beautiful. And the other one, her mother tells Jesse that you can change this world with words.
Words. Yeah.
Yes, the
Yeah.
beautiful. The question I had is the name, Pocahontas, was her name?
Pocahontas Foster.
Oh my
Real
goodness.
person.
Okay, I was like, okay,
Real
that's wild.
Pocahontas Foster was like 19 years old when she started working for W.E.B. Du Bois. And then she actually had some, like 2 poems published in the Brownies book.
Oh,
I
wow.
didn't make up the only names, and the only people I made up in the book were like waiters and cab drivers. I didn't make up not one person. Her name was Pocahontas Foster.
Yeah, I found that very interesting. I like doing the audiobook. Miles
Yes,
did
Robin
wonderful
Miles,
because she, Mamie Smith, you could
the
hear her
singer.
sing.
Hmm.
Yes, and she was the first African to record the
Yes,
blues in history. I went down Black Swan Records. I do like I
you
love
went down the
historic.
rabbit hole.
My
I love
God,
it.
yeah, you should
I
have given
love
me
it.
all the notes. I have like
I
three
love
pages
it.
of notes.
I love it when
chapters and
people
everything.
I love it when
Well,
people can't even finish the book because they're going down the rabbit hole. I
I
love it.
finished the whole book. I even looked up Birthright by T.S. Sterling about
Yes.
she called it amazing, basically garbage, but amazing. Yeah, I saw what he looked like and everything. I love
Yeah.
looking at to see what those people are like.
And you can,
Thank you.
I
I
mean,
loved it. The
oh,
book is amazing.
thank
Enjoy.
you.
Thank
You
you.
can, you can still read Birthright
Yeah,
because I read it for my research. So everything that Jesse said, I understood because it's
there is
horrible.
confusion. I don't know if
There
you
is
see it.
confusion. Yep.
Yes,
I
that's
read
I even put that there.
Yep, I read there is confusion for research, and that's how I knew that. I mean, I already knew they had an affair, but there's a lot of WEB in that book.
Yes.
And I read her second book called Plum Bun afterwards, only because I'm fascinated with her now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't make up a person except for those peripheral people.
hmm But thank you again so much for I enjoyed all 15 hours. That's
Oh,
a
and
long
yeah, it was
audio.
all. But you know, Robin was so good. She's
Yes.
just a good narrator.
Yes. Oh, thank you again so much, Victoria.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Maria.
I was just saying, I felt the same way. Like, I want you to learn about all the people as well. So I totally believe what Maria was saying. And thank you, Maria. So next, I will go. Mindy has a question. So she's coming up next on my screen. So you can go ask your
Uh,
question.
I'm going to piggyback on that. I listened and read,
Did you
and
do it at the same time?
I did.
Okay, because people call that immersive reading now. I'm gonna try that.
I
People tell
do
me
it a
it's
lot now.
wonderful. People
I
say
do it a
it's
lot.
okay.
Me and Maria, we talk about this because I do. I had a car accident last year, so for that time period, I couldn't really concentrate on a physical book. Audiobooks were a
Yeah,
lifesaver.
yeah.
But I really gotten to really love them. And part of my question was, I don't know if Maria had said it, what I listened to the First Ladies. I loved it. And I thought it was the same narrator that did this, that did the First Ladies.
It was the same narrator that did the personal librarian, the first ladies, and this.
Okay.
N-
Oh, okay.
And it's
Okay.
really interesting. You're only like the second person who's noticed it, but Robin Miles is just so good. She's so good. But the first person who brought it up said to me that she was a little confused because she said she had just listened to the personal librarian, and so then hearing the same voice in Harlem Rhapsody confused her a little bit. So I said, dang it, that means my next book I'm not going to use her. She's just, because she's just so good, but it could be confused. Even though I think she changes her voice to the character, the person had just finished a personal librarian, and she said, wow, she's like, it kept throwing her. And I don't want that to happen.
I don't know. It didn't throw me necessarily because listened to the First Ladies a while back.
Yeah.
I still have the personal librarian physical book on my shelf at home. I haven't read it, but the First Ladies was the first book of yours that I had read, and I
I love
loved
that book.
it. I
Yeah.
loved it, and I loved this. When you were talking, I mean, I could go on about this, but I'm going to give other
Mm.
people a chance. But when I was in school, and some others on the screen know, I really did not like learning history. I did not. I felt I was reading Nancy Drew books under my
Yeah.
desk,
Yeah.
social studies, as we called it in those days. I remember Langston Hughes. But other than that, I mean, it was so interesting. I mean, I'm a lifelong New Yorker. So for me, just fascinating. My daughter has been fascinated with Harlem. She went to NYU, and it was I just found it so fascinating. And so I wanted to let you to know that and keep on
Oh.
writing because I just love, yeah, you and
Oh.
I love just this book. So,
Thank you. What part of New York?
well, I lived in Manhattan on the Lower East Side for the first 10 years. I
Okay.
lived in the Bronx for 7 years, and now I live out in Suffolk County.
Oh, okay. So you live all the way out in there.
Yeah,
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 so I lived in Stuyvesant Town when I went to NYU. I went to NYU Stern to get my MBA. And so I lived in lower
Lower East Side.
East Side.
Yes, my mother grew up down there. Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, so thank you. I'm going to let other people have
Oh,
a chance,
thank
but
you.
excellent book. I really loved it.
Thank you, Mindy, for sharing. And next, we're going to go to Sharon.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for being here. And I was at one of the ones where you were here with is it Marie Benedict? And
Yes.
but I can't remember which book it was because I've read all, I read all three. So although I haven't
Oh,
read all the way through this one yet. Um, but I do have to say, like I remember that she was really the one that was doing historical fiction. I've never read her other books, and I remember you saying something about that. And I do remember you saying you were working on a historical fiction. This is amazing. And yeah, so I
oh,
just want to tell you that. And I'm going to piggyback a little bit, I guess, on whoever just spoke last, because it's so important. And I heard you say that, but for because you bring it to people in a way that they can read it and know it and learn about it. Whereas, like, let's say I heard about it, I have that mind that would then go, if I heard something like you heard, like a kernel, I'll go like, why do I not know this? And I'll go look it up, but I'm not going to learn everything because I just don't have that type of time,
yeah.
And to have this that people can then read, and especially in these times where people are erasing history, um, and not caring about truth. It's
Yeah.
like so wonderful. And that also when things are about words. So words about words,
Yeah.
it's just amazing. And I just want to
Yeah.
thank you for that. It's
Oh
just,
my goodness.
yeah, it's just great. I haven't finished it, but I will. Oh, and one more thing is I do it in three forms. So I have the audio,
Uh-huh.
and sometimes I have to check from the audio back to the real book. Like when she was singing, I wanted to see how that looked in the book. And and that type of thing. But I also like it on an ebook because I'm going to say cheat. I can do it real fast. I hit the button and it goes web search. And I just have to hit
Yeah.
that part of the book and it pops you somewhere else. And I like
Yeah.
to stop and look up. So I'm just, keep going and thank you. And
Oh, thank you so much. And I love what you said about what I try to do now is history is accessible. It's not a textbook and it's not forcing something down your throat. And when I say I was put on earth to write this book, I'm not negating all the other books I wrote. I'm not negating the Lifetime movies, because I think those books helped me write history in a really accessible way.
right. I
And
thought about that actually when you did, especially like the intimate scenes. And I'm wondering, I haven't read your other books to know whether there was some romance in some of your prior books. And there was one other
yeah.
thing that the people have to speak that I wanted to say, but I'm
Yeah,
not going
there's romance. I wrote the Seven Deadly Sins series, and the first book that's online, and the first book and the first movie was Lust.
Oh,
So
okay.
I know
All
how to
right.
handle
Okay.
that.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Oh, I
Oh
remember what I
wow.
was going to say. If there's books like this that show that we don't know people that's so important to history that have been marginalized because of sexism or ableism or racism, then we'll start to think, wait, who's behind this person that we're seeing this person up there, but who's doing the real
Good
work?
point. Good
And I
point.
think we will start to think that way because
Good
it's happening.
point.
Well, but we need more of this to show us this.
I never thought about that. Now maybe that's how I can even look for people. Like I never thought about when I see somebody here, who's the person behind them, who's hiding. I never thought about that. Very good point. Thank you. You may
Well,
have
thank
helped
you.
me get my next books.
Wait.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much, Sharon, for sharing your thoughts. And next we will go to Carmen. Thank you. Okay, whenever you're ready, Carmen, you can. Oh, I'm sorry,
Carmen, you're on mute.
you're still on mute. Okay.
Okay, I'm good. Well, to the author, Mike, oh my gosh, I don't even know how to give the compliments because you touched me in so many different ways, even with the energy that you displayed in answering the questions and talking about the book. It made me feel even more excited. And I'm in the middle of reading it and I'm going, oh my God. It's just one of those books that I will read again and again. Okay.
Oh,
And you touch so many areas. We'd be on here talking all night
yeah,
because
well,
but the
yeah.
one thing that I really admired about what you said and what you proved in the book was that writing is activism. And
Activism.
when I'm dealing so much now with books that are being banned and Black writers being discredited
Yeah.
and funding for children not to even have the books in the classroom, it
I
is
know.
a welcome piece when you talk about how you are purposefully using
Purpose.
your writing. So I think that's what touched me most about what you said, because it's not just telling a story. And I appreciate the story because you know what? I know a lot of the people in the books through studies in school. But when you read it in the way you wrote it, it's social history and it was much more compelling. I mean, I know more about W. Du Bois and
And
I
you want to
studied him
know.
in school. That's correct. And then when you touched on Harlem, because I went to school up in Harlem, I went to City College, and I know the
Okay.
Schaumburg Library well back in the day. But without going off, the thing that impressed me is that you brought Harlem to life like a character in the story too.
Oh, I
And
really
I
wanted.
learned about the different eras with the 20s and the 60s and the whole Harlem Renaissance. And it just moved me in so many different ways. So I just wanted to say that without taking up too much time and preventing everybody else from
Oh,
talking. So,
no, thank you so much. No, I purposely tried to make Harlem a character. Like
yes,
that was one of my reasons for even going there. And Harlem
yes,
is a
it's a
character. You know,
character.
it
Yeah,
is a
and you
character.
really, and you can't understand the artists unless you understand where they're coming
Yeah,
from.
yeah,
And that brings out another element in even understanding when they say certain things, and you say, well, where's that coming from, even with Gene Toomer. So I really understood a lot better some of those artists also just from reading this book, because
yeah,
many times when I read in school, you get the surface. Oh, read the poem, which is lovely. Langston Hughes wrote Mother to Son. Let's read that.
yeah,
And we go off and we talk about that, but we never go in depth to talk about the person who created that
yeah.
and why,
And where it came
and
from,
where it, right,
and when you say, and I thank you for hearing me when I was talking about my art being my activism now and
right,
writing is my resistance. But see, you're in this with me because reading becomes your resistance because
right.
your part is the most important part because they're
Mhm.
trying to ban the books so that you don't read them.
Read it,
But
right,
once you read them, they can't take it from your mind.
exactly,
Once
right,
you tell somebody else about it, they
right,
can't take it from their mind.
right,
So we're in this together. Writing is
right.
my resistance, but reading is your resistance.
Right, right. And it works on all different levels. As I said, I could keep going talking about all the things you said in the book, but I know others are waiting to speak to you. But if you are available, I want to which I'll speak to Michelle. We are members of NAACP. I'm a member of the NAACP. And
Ah,
I
okay.
would love if you could do something, because many of us as members may not even know a lot
Yeah,
about the history
absolutely.
and about Du Bois.
Absolutely.
So I saw that as another piece
Yeah,
that helps
absolutely.
tie in as we build community and network and provide knowledge, you
Yeah,
know?
well,
So,
Michelle has all my information. Absolutely.
right.
Absolutely.
So I will be in touch. Okay.
Thank you.
And so good for you to come.
Oh,
Okay.
well, thank you. And you said that my enthusiasm, it's very interesting. We authors and any artists always feed off of the people that they're talking to.
Right.
And so, how you're so excited now to go read the book, I'm excited to get back to writing because I'm like, they think I
Yeah.
can do it.
Yeah.
Like, you think I can do it.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
it works both
It
ways.
works
So,
both ways.
thank you. Thank all
Right.
of you for that part.
Right. Right. And again, kudos to I'm doing the audio piece with your book, and
Yes.
the reader that's
Yes.
telling the
Robin
story.
Miles.
I love her. I heard her on the other book, Librarian, Private Librarian.
Yes.
I just love her, and I
Yeah.
didn't find it to be a problem having
Okay.
her, but I just wanted to mention that too, because that pulled me in. And
Okay.
then I also keep a copy and I read but it
Okay.
was just great, a good experience.
Okay. Well, Mindy said it didn't bother her either. So I just always want to make sure.
Right, right.
And I like
Okay.
hearing more people listening to audiobooks because I think more and
Yeah.
more people are doing it.
And
Yeah,
I read more to me because the audio is, I could do it when I'm walking to the grocery store. I can do, so I love it.
It adds another perspective. I know Patricia wants to talk, but
right.
it does
Yes.
add another perspective.
Mhm.
So,
Hi.
you,
Just
thank
quickly,
you, Carmen, and then we're gonna have Patricia, ask a question.
okay, just quickly, I just wanted to let you know I'm fascinated by you. I'm saying a lot of what Carmen said. And once again, your enthusiasm, you're just how you went about doing what you have done and will continue to do. And it's just it makes me want to see more and hear more about you. I did read the personal librarian and I enjoyed that very much. I ran out and bought this book because I thought you were going to be in person. And I said, oh, let me get the book. I want to have the
Um,
author sign the book. And
oh,
yes, and then I said, oh, it's a Zoom. Oh,
where are you guys located? Is everybody in New York?
It's in Long Island,
yes, Westbury, New York,
in Nassau County.
Long Island, Nassau County. We're right here.
Okay.
We're local. But
Yeah. Okay. Oh, I'm gonna figure something out.
and the NAACP chapter the Commons referring to is in Westbury, New York, also.
Okay, we'll figure this out.
We can meet you there. But now I'm getting ready to go on a trip, and I said, oh, I really should have gotten the audio. Now I'm going to have to do the audio because I don't want to carry the book with me. But
Ah,
this is just fascinating, and I just enjoyed your presentation so much. I read two other books having to do with the Harlem area too. Colson Whitehead. Uh,
yes.
yes, that one. I forgot
I
the
think was it called Harlem Shuffle?
Harlem Shuffle, and another one was about something with a grocery store. Um,
Oh, Heaven and
the growth,
Earth.
but that
Yeah.
sort of was in that environment, and that
Yeah.
is also very interesting. But I really have enjoyed this presentation. I'm very glad that I logged in and am here.
Oh,
So
well, I'm glad
great
too.
on this. Hope we'll meet again. I'm from the other HU. HU,
Oh,
but
okay. Well, that's too bad, but I love you anyway.
okay. And I'm a sister from another mother, Alpha Kappa Alpha
Oh, okay.
Sorority.
So
We're
we have
connected.
opposites on everything.
Yes. Okay. Thank you again.
Thank you.
And I want to, first of all, I want to thank you, Victoria. I, you're such, not only you're a great author, but you're a great storyteller. Like when you're telling your stories, it's just that you draw us all in. Just
Uh,
enjoy this so much. As
yeah,
I
but
said,
a lot of it had to do with who you are, no, seriously, when I was talking to you, I felt it was so thank you for saying that. But it was just I felt like I was talking to friends.
oh, that's so nice of you to say. Thank you.
Yeah,
And
so
and also, as I'm sure, like people want to continue hear what you're doing and everything, and keep in touch. I was wondering if you could share like how to contact you, like Instagram or social network, stuff like
So
that.
on every single social media, I am Victoria Christopher Murray. So you'll be able to find me. And then my website is victoriachristophermurray.com. And I have a mailing list where I always let people know about what's going on with me and where I'm touring and where I'm going. But Michelle, I want to try to figure out something because I'm in New York too often, where I could hop on the train. In fact, I'm doing something in Sag Harbor, so won't I be going like past you guys?
Yes,
Uh,
that's out east.
I'll have to talk to Carmen and we'll see what's going on. But yeah, that's a great idea. We'll see.
Yeah, so we'll figure that out. We'll
Yeah.
figure out something. You're gonna get your book signed,
Oh,
Oh, that's
and I won't be late.
great.
I'm so embarrassed by that. I'm a Virgo. I can't be late. I'm telling you, it was 6:15. It was 6:15.
I'm just saying, you're really into that book. I mean, it makes us just want to read it like so much more. I mean, amazing.
mhm.
Um, okay, so I just want you just to let everybody know, as I said, thank you all for coming. Thank you, Victoria.
Yes.
And I just want to let you know about the next virtual author visit. We do it every other month. And it's for Christina McMorris. It's her book, The Girls of Good Fortune. And it's going to be on Wednesday, August 20th at 7 p.m.
Ooh.
Eastern. And you can register on the website. But I will be sending you emails, if you want, to remind you about that. But I just wanted to let you know. And thank you again, everyone. Thank you, Victoria. And I also
Oh,
hope,
thank you. This was wonderful, ladies. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. This was wonderful, but I'll see you soon. We'll figure this out.
thank
Okay.
you so much. Take care.
Okay, good night.
Take care.
Good night. Good night.
Good night. Thank you,
Good
Victoria.
night, everyone.
Okay.
Take care. Thank you all for attending.
Okay.
Thank you, Michelle.
Very welcome. Good night, everyone.
Night.
Hope you all have a good night.